So the truth is everyone already channels source, and that's because source is your highest self, your higher self, the highest vantage point of consciousness in totality, which we're all fractals and extensions of, is source. So that connection can actually never be severed. Now, what happens is you as the antenna, you as the one with the psychic instruments, the way you translate frequency, these psychic instruments can simply just not be attuned to the frequency that is source. So let's look at let's look at reality as an infinite radio station. And source, so the highest point in consciousness, the highest point in infinite intelligence, is vibrating at this frequency, broadcasting at this frequency. And let's say the angelic realm vibrates at this frequency, and this particular star family vibrates at this frequency, right? So whoever you want to channel, you really just attune to their frequency. You match their vibration. Now, if source is vibrating here and you're vibrating here, can you see the frequency gap? And this is why it's so difficult for people to hear source. Although source is always talking to you, always communicating with you, you may not be able to hear based on your own vibration. So first step is raise your vibration. The more you raise your vibration, you will automatically, organically be pulling directly from the field, the quantum field of all that is. You will be channeling infinite intelligence. Now, everyone has experienced this to a certain degree. Let's say you get really excited for whatever reason. You're excited, you're happy, you're like just in this high vibrating energy. You notice how when you're in that type of frequency, that's when all of the ideas download. It's like, I'm getting this, I'm getting this, I'm getting this, I'm getting this. Well, it's because you found a way to match the vibration of source. So source is unconditional love. Source is excitement and joy. Source is freedom and expansion. Source is abundance and clarity. And when you find a way to cultivate that state of being, you have access to source. Now, because source loves us unconditionally, there's always going to be ways for source to work around our frequency and get information and guidance to us. So I don't want you to overlook things such as signs and synchronicities. And this is actually how you can become more psychic. The more you identify signs and synchronicities, let's say it's 11:11 on the clock and you go, the universe is communicating with me. And you say and you affirm and you acknowledge that is communication. What happens is you begin to activate in your subconscious psyche that you already are in divine communication. You see, channeling itself is also a manifestation like everything is. And what most people do is they go, well, I can't hear source and I can't hear my guides and I'm not seeing anything and I'm not. So every time you say that, what happens? You just collapse into the same timeline where you are not the translator of the communication, even though you've got so many guides talking to you, wanting to communicate with you, trying to get your attention. So recognize the synchronicities and acknowledge them no matter how small you think they are. And so this is where we cannot compare the way that source is communicating with us to how we see someone else channeling source and how we think we need to channel source, okay? So you are driving in the car and the car in front of you, you look at the license plate and maybe there's a particular word like love or there's a certain numerical sequence. If you allow yourself to soak in that moment as divine interaction and connection, understanding that the fact that you saw that in that moment, you could have observed so many other things within your field of awareness, but you saw that, you felt the energy of that, and then you felt it in your heart. If you would simply say, I am channeling spirit, you would experience more communication, meaning the more you do this, the more you get. Now, if you're overlooking the small signs and synchronicities, then how do you think source is going to communicate with you louder and stronger? Now, another thing that I'm being guided to talk about is just simply meditation and why this is so important. Thoughts vibrate at a certain frequency. You know, we think up to 10,000 plus thoughts per day. And so majority of them are not necessarily positive. They're not vibrating in the higher tiers of energy. So when we quiet our mind and we find a way to enter silence and the thoughts lose power and then our vibration starts to raise, this is where we can channel source. We can hear divine source. Now, another thing is when you raise your vibration, it's usually because you have resolved some sort of trauma and story that you keep telling. Because remember, source vibrates in a very high frequency. So source is aware of the trauma that you may be carrying, but source is not attached in that energy with you. Source is not looking at that experience the same way that you may be looking at it, and continuously to create energetic cords into that past timeline, and thus continue to carry that energy, which doesn't allow you to match the frequency of source and channel source. So if you're going to channel this very, very high pure energy, you have to cleanse yourself vibrationally. You have to purify the vibrational baggage. How are you going to do this? Very simple. We can all do this now. Whoever you hold resentment and anger towards, understand that source does not feel that way about that person. Whatever situations of your past that you hold shame and embarrassment about or feel disempowerment from, source is not relating to that in the same way. And so this looks like forgiveness. How do we actually, I know people say that, so I want to go deeper here. How do we actually practice forgiveness? Recognize that whoever has hurt you or harmed you or didn't give you the love that you deserve, this person is not operating as their true consciousness. They're a fractal and a version of source energy that has forgotten who and what they are, and they've been programmed, and they've also been hurt, and they're operating out of their subconscious psyche. They're not in their highest version. They're not operating from their highest self. When you understand that they're not operating from their highest self, you can forgive them. And the forgiveness, I mean, really, this is all a part of the experience anyways, which is why for source, there's nothing to forgive. But for us as humans, how we can adopt this energy of compassion is we go, oh wow, it must really hurt to not be who you really are. And instead of you allowing them to create hurt and pain within you, you recognize that they are hurt or they were hurt, and that's why they said something or they did something. They weren't truly who they are as an infinite soul of love and light. And so you forgive them, understanding that their journey is painful as it is, okay? So forgiveness is really powerful. You know, all these people that you hold unresolved energy towards, that blocks you from channeling the vibration of source, right? Because source loves them unconditionally. Source sees the best in them. Source sees who they truly are. And when you're not in resonance with that perception, you're not going to be able to channel the perspective of source, okay? So forgiveness, unresolved trauma. Now this other thing, shifting the way you connect to the storyline. What most people do is, well, I was born to this family in this situation and we didn't have money and I'm from this racial background and it's really unfortunate and I'm really limited and blah, 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 blah. Do you think source is looking at you that way? As a matter of fact, I just want to clarify this for you. Source does not feel bad for anyone. Compassion, yes. Understanding, yes. Love, absolutely. But source does not pity you. Source is not looking down on you. Source is not playing into the victim character that you are playing into. So if you want to hear source, if you want to channel source, collapse the idea of being the victim. Start asking, source, what is your perspective? Source, how do you see this person? Source, how can I relate to this topic? Source, how should I look at this situation? And what will start to happen is you will become more empowered and uplifted, and your vibration will raise and expand, and then you'll be hearing source energy all the time.